This choir has travelled from rural Australia to a remote area of East Timor to repay a debt of honour. It's the culmination of a 15-year relationship between the two communities. For Abel Guterras, then a 19-year-old, it began when he escaped to Australia just before Indonesia invaded East Timor in 1975, leaving his family behind.
My dad and other brothers and sisters were killed, yes. It was sad because you cannot, you don't know what exactly happened. But then equally, you're determined to fight. Yeah, fight for freedom.
For the Australians, it began with the belief that the Australian government should have been doing more to support the people of East Timor.
Many of us were aware of the debt of honour that Australia owed to the Timorese people.
During World War II, as Japanese forces swept towards Australia, they came up against Australian commandos in East Timor, who withdrew to the mountains to fight a guerrilla campaign against a far larger Japanese force.
They were supported by these Timorese lads are called the criados. They guided the Australian commandos, they interpreted for them, they led them to villages where they could obtain food, they carried supplies, and it's one of the great military feats of Australian history. Unfortunately, at great cost to the Timorese people. Upwards of 20% of the population, 1 in 5, were killed through the reprisals.
3 decades later, when Indonesia invaded East Timor, Abel Guterras was lucky to escape to Darwin from a remote airfield.
An Australian caribou went over to evacuate people, mostly priests and nuns, the clergy, and then we got waved on board.
Stuck in Australia, he worked as an activist to build Australian support for East Timorese independence.
And do our part to publicise and tell the world and tell anyone who wants to listen that our struggle is still well alive inside the country and we want our freedom.
The East Timorese fought a war of resistance for the next 24 years, for much of it with little international support.
The politics of the time really did not favour us, so Australia as a state was on the other side of the fence. Yeah. Australia as a people, we had the support.
But the tide turned, and in 1999, the East Timorese voted overwhelmingly for independence from Indonesia. But the vote ignited more destruction and bloodshed. Australia led a United Nations military intervention. They found a country left in ruins, needing not only to rebuild, but needing to establish a new government.
We lost almost 250,000 people. Every single person in East Timor was touched by the war. Virtually everything was destroyed, there was no bureaucracy. So we had to build everything. The thing was that we are free. We are free, so we work, build a country, build a state.
In 2003, Abel Guterras went to Sydney as Timor Leste's Consul General and set about establishing friendship groups between communities in Timor Leste and Australia.
To see how we can galvanise the sympathy, the support that there is in the Australian community.
Over 30 friendship groups were established, including the group in Bega. Each group was paired with a different district in Timor Leste.
Abel Guterras twinned us up with the Bariki Natabora sub-district, which is a fairly remote area on the south coast. Over the 15 years, we've worked on things like fencing, supplies of tools, support of permaculture workshops and camps for school garden projects, supply of tractors, fuel and seeds, water and toilet infrastructure, the building of the new St Francis School, supplying schools with sports equipment, about 150 bicycles, professional development of the teachers. We provided agricultural scholarships, a maternity centre, health booklets, reusable hygiene kits for female students. We've been supporting women's groups developing their own expertise in sewing and manufacturing things to sell at market.
And everyone's been doing a lot of singing. Dave Croden is a professional musician and teacher.
It was a real singing culture over there. Particularly in the schools and with the kids, it just uninhibited, pure singing.
David supplied just hundreds of musical instruments that were crated up and taken over there. He really got on board local people, which again strengthened the bonds of friendship, because this was an international language that we didn't need to be able to speak perfect Teton, or they didn't need to speak perfect English for us to communicate.
Music make you happy. Yes, music give you peace. It brings in that sense of living in harmony with your neighbour, with your friends, with your environment.
Every one of these concerts we played at became big community events.
It was so successful that the group now has an even bigger vision.
I envisaged that maybe one day there'd be an international choir festival in Timor.
Wow, that's even better. If that happens, woohoo! Can you imagine you have a choir from different countries? Yeah, like maybe some group from the Pacific, some group from Asia, like Japan or Korea or India or even Afghanistan. Yeah, that would be really fantastic if something like that happened. Man.
It just keeps on multiplying. Yeah, gets stronger. It's great.
You sow the seed, and then it falls on fertile ground. It will grow, and I think this is probably one of them.
Bill Brown, ABC News, Bega.